Ivan Ilyich is dead. That's how it starts and that's how it ends, but everything in between is a slow, terrifying unraveling. A man who thought he had lived rightly dies with the sudden clarity that he hadn't lived at all. The people around him don't cry, they calculate. His colleagues hear of his death and immediately think of job promotions. One friend even wonders if he'll have to spend his evening paying condolences or if he can still make it to cards. That's how disposable a life is when it's been lived for appearances. The world keeps spinning and Ivan is already fading. But this story doesn't belong to the people outside the coffin, it belongs to the man inside it. Ivan Ilyich had done everything right, on paper. He was ordinary, respectable, polished. He climbed the ladder without scandal. Married a woman because it seemed the right thing to do. Took a job because it paid well. Decorated his house to impress people he didn't even like. His life was an echo chamber of what society approved of, and in chasing that approval, he slowly erased himself. He wasn't passionate, he wasn't monstrous, he was exactly what he was told to be, and now, dying, he realizes it. The life he had built was not a life, it was a performance. The moment that begins to fracture everything is a trivial fall. He bangs his side while hanging curtains, something that should heal but doesn't. The pain sharpens, it spreads, and slowly it becomes his shadow. The doctors give him empty reassurances. They use Latin words like armor. Yeah, his wife gets irritated that he's moody. His colleagues look uncomfortable. No one wants to hear that he might be dying, least of all himself. But the truth keeps growing inside him like a black seed. He is not going to recover. And that's when the real story begins, not the dying, but the reckoning. Because death, in this book, is not a plot device. It's a mirror, and the longer Ivan stares into it, the more distorted and then clearer his own face becomes. He starts to panic, not at death itself, but at the possibility that his life had been all wrong, that he had never actually lived, that every polite nod, every social dinner, every legal memo he prided himself on, all of it had been a detour from what mattered. And now the map is gone, the time is gone, the man is almost gone. No one wants to admit it, but we all carry the same fear that the things we sacrifice our lives for might be meaningless in the end, that the roles we play will not love us back. Ivan's greatest terror isn't pain, it's the realization that he might have wasted the one thing he couldn't repeat. And the people around him, his wife, his doctor, his colleagues, aren't evil. They're just distracted, unwilling to look death in the face because it reminds them they're next. So they pretend, they say he looks better, they tell him he needs fresh air, they minimize his grief because acknowledging it would mean acknowledging their own illusions. But Ivan can no longer pretend. He begins to scream at night, not out of physical agony, though that is there, but out of a kind of metaphysical suffocation. He's screaming at the lie he built his life around, the lie that being proper is the same as being good, that social success is the same as happiness, that fitting in is enough. He screams because there is something inside him that wants out, even as his body is giving in. One servant, Gerasim, is the only one who doesn't flinch. This young peasant sits with him, holds his legs when they hurt, and doesn't lie. When Ivan says he is dying, Gerasim doesn't deny it. He nods, he listens, he simply says, "We all have to die." And that simple, unsentimental truth cracks something open in Ivan. Gerasim isn't rich, he isn't educated, but he is real. And in his presence, Ivan tastes the first real honesty of his life. Gerasim is not performing, and for the first time, neither is Ivan. It is staggering how late we sometimes meet our truest selves, and how much of our lives we spend building houses for ghosts. There's a moment somewhere in the middle of Ivan's decline where time loses shape. Days blur, the clocks tick, but they stop meaning anything. What Ivan starts to feel isn't just fear, it's humiliation, a kind of spiritual embarrassment. Not because he is dying, but because his body is betraying the image he fought so hard to keep upright. Dignity starts slipping through his fingers. He soils himself. He cries in front of strangers. His wife pities him, but only in the way one pities a cracked vase, not a human being. And Ivan realizes something chilling. People love you most when you're useful, when you're beautiful, when you're silent. Now he is none of those things, so they begin to back away. But death doesn't. It keeps arriving not all at once, but in waves. A tightening of the gut, a strange smell in the room, a new silence in the house. Ivan begins to feel like he's already a ghost watching his life rot from the outside. He can't understand how the world keeps functioning, how people still laugh, eat, flirt, play music when something this enormous is happening to him. He looks out the window at life, and it feels indecent. He wonders if it will all continue this way once he's gone. Of course it will, and that too is its own grief. But here's what no one talks about, what Tolstoy dares to show. Dying is lonely, not just because people abandon you, but because no one else can cross that border with you. No matter how many loved ones you have, no matter how much wealth you own, no matter how prepared or religious or good you've been, you go alone. You die in your own skin, in your own thoughts. And that isolation, that internal scream of what was this all for? That's what kills Ivan long before his body gives out. He starts bargaining. Maybe if he eats differently, maybe if he sleeps on his side, maybe if he reads the Bible. He looks for loopholes in the sentence. He tries to be pious, but it's not real repentance. It's desperation dressed up in ritual. His mind spirals. He asks questions no one can answer. Why me? What did I do to deserve this? Why now? What is this pain for? But behind every question is a deeper one. What is the point of any of it? He looks at his family and feels alien. His wife talks to guests about his illness like it's a social inconvenience. His children avoid his eyes. The doctor sounds rehearsed. Everyone is pretending. Everyone is clinging to politeness like a mask. And Ivan can't breathe under it anymore. He starts to remember his youth. The carefree moments, the sincerity before ambition took over. He recalls moments that felt alive, not many, but enough to make the absence feel louder. He remembers loving the fresh air, the sun on a holiday, a joke that made him laugh from his belly once, but all of it feels stolen now, as if someone else had lived those moments, as someone who hadn't yet learned to be respectable. He realizes he became old not when his hair grayed, but when he stopped being real. There's a scene, almost unbearable in its quiet, where Ivan stares at his wife and wants to scream, "Why are you pretending? I'm dying and you're talking about curtains." But he doesn't, because a part of him still clings to decorum, still wants to be liked, even now. And then the screaming begins again, a scream that lasts for days. Days, not literal perhaps, but spiritual. The text says it clearly. For 3 whole days, even Ilyich screamed. And it's not pain. It's the sound of a soul breaking through its own shell, of a man finally seeing himself with no filters left. The scream is a rebirth, violent, terrifying, necessary, and then somehow it softens. It's the presence of his son finally crying beside him that opens the door. The boy isn't pretending. He isn't scared of Ivan's face or the stink of death. He sees his father, really sees him, and in that pure, wordless moment, something shifts. Ivan stops screaming, not because the pain ends, but because for the first time, love arrives without condition. It arrives in the shape of a small boy's tears, and it's enough. He realizes what had been missing. All his life, he had avoided love that made demands. He had chosen surfaces over substance. But now love comes, not as reward, not as transaction, but as truth. And even does something he's never done before. He lets go. He forgives them all, not out of moral superiority, but because he no longer needs them to be anything else. He sees how afraid they all are, how lost, how human. He stops asking why he is dying and starts asking how to die well, and that is the moment he begins to live. Something astonishing happens when Ivan stops clinging. It isn't a miracle. The pain doesn't vanish. His body doesn't heal, but he changes. And that shift is almost invisible, like a shadow moving across the wall, but it's everything because for the first time, he stops measuring his worth by the rules of a world that is already forgetting him. He stops performing, he begins to see clearly how many years were wasted on fear masquerading as virtue, on chasing safety instead of meaning, on being agreeable instead of being true. The scream quiets into stillness. He no longer fights what's coming, and the moment he stops fighting, something inside opens, not with words, not with fanfare, but with something closer to grace. Tolstoy doesn't spell it out. He doesn't need to, because you feel it. The story begins in death, but ends in light. Not the soft, sentimental kind. This is the kind of light that sears the lies out of you, that leaves nothing behind but truth. Ivan starts to know that the thing he feared wasn't death itself. It was not having lived. That's what had poisoned him. That's what made the pain unbearable. But now, in these final hours, he sees the lie for what it was. He had been afraid of the wrong thing. Death isn't the enemy. Living falsely is. Choking on your own decorum is. Spending a lifetime avoiding discomfort only to realize it kept you from connection is. The moment of release is quiet, almost secret. He lies on his deathbed. His wife is there, confused, trying to do what's right. His son clutches his hand, sobbing. And suddenly Ivan looks at them, not with resentment, not with longing, but with understanding. He sees their blindness, their panic, their brokenness, and he loves them. Not because they earned it, but because he finally understands. None of them know what they're doing. Not really. They're all trying to stay afloat in a world that never taught them how to be real. And he wants to say, it's okay, I forgive you and I forgive myself. But he doesn't need to say it. The forgiveness is in his eyes. It's in the way he stops clenching. It's in the way he looks toward the darkness and no longer trembles. He sees the thing coming, not as punishment, but as truth. And truth, once embraced, loses its power to terrify. The last thing he says, if we're to believe the silence between the lines, is not a word but a shift of the soul. He sought his old habitual fear of death and did not find it. So that sentence is not dramatic, but it is seismic. The fear is gone. Death, the thing that chased him down the corridors of his life, no longer has teeth. It is no longer the monster. It is the final door, and Ivan walks through it, not with dread, but with acceptance, almost with peace. In his last breath, something breaks open that had been locked his entire life. A kind of light spills out, a recognition. The false life dies, and what remains isn't horror, but relief, a deep exhale. So that's all there is, he seems to say. Yes, but it's everything. And then he dies, but the brilliance of Tolstoy is that he doesn't let the story end there. He doesn't let you escape with just pity. He leaves you holding the mirror. Because this isn't a book about Ivan, it's a warning. You are Ivan. We all are. We all live some version of the life he did, checked boxes, made peace with shallow routines, nodded politely through things we should have screamed about, silenced parts of ourselves to keep the performance going. We decorate our lives to look like success. We silence the questions that haunt us. We treat honesty like a threat, and all the while, something inside us is screaming, quietly at first, then louder. That's the sound Ivan heard, and that's the sound this book is daring you to hear, now while you still can, because it's not too late, unless you wait. The reason the death of Ivan Ilyich haunts you long after the final line isn't because it's sad, it's because it makes you ask, am I already dying this way? Not physically, spiritually, silently, one compromise at a time, one fake smile too many, one I'm fine when your soul is bleeding. Tolstoy doesn't wag a finger, he doesn't offer answers. What he does is more brutal. He gives you the cost of not asking the right questions until it's too late. He doesn't dramatize death. He strips it bare. He makes you feel the weight of a clock that never stops ticking while you keep pretending it's someone else's problem. But he also quietly, powerfully offers something redemptive, a sliver of hope buried under all that dread. Because Ivan does find peace, not in the comfort of others, not in rituals, not in the illusion that everything's fine, but in the moment he stops running, in the second he stops resisting the truth. That's the lesson. We spend our lives avoiding the very thing that could set us free. Though we drown in distractions, we collect objects and accolades and approval like armor. But inside, something knows, something waits. And it is not impressed. It's not telling you to quit your job or leave your marriage or live like a monk. It's asking, are you alive? Not breathing, not functioning, but alive. When you sit in silence, do you recognize the person behind your face? Or have you become a character in a story someone else wrote for you? That's what Ivan discovered too late. The tragedy is not that we die, it's that we live half lives, polite lives, pretend lives, and then beg for meaning when the curtain is already falling. So what do we do with that? We stop pretending. We tell the truth even when our voices shake. We choose real over impressive. We stop outsourcing our worth to job titles, property deeds, or the approval of people who would step over our graves to catch a train. We listen to the scream under the silence, the one that says, this isn't what you were made for. And then we build differently. Love deeply, even if it hurts. Rest when you're tired, not when you're dead. Say what needs to be said before the moment's gone. Leave the party early if the party is killing your soul. Hold the hand of someone who's drowning in silence, not because you're the hero, but because you remember what it felt like. And if you are that someone, look up, breathe, there's still time. Ivan's story is not your fate, it's your wake-up call. Let it be the book that doesn't just make you think, but makes you change. Not in a dramatic movie scene way, in the quiet, sacred way that happens when you stop living as a ghost. Because the only tragedy greater than death is realizing too late that you were never really here. And now you are.